This podcast details true crime cases. It contains adult themes and may contain descriptions of violence. It is not intended for children. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Once Upon a Crime. This month's topic will be focused on Hollywood actors who ran afoul of the law. In this first episode, a young actor makes it big in Hollywood as a beloved cast member of a popular American sitcom. When the show ends, 30-year-old Danny Masterson's celebrity status would catapult his career into roles in film and television. But allegations against Masterson for sexual assault in 2017 would bring his career to a halt, especially after it was discovered that the charges leveled against him spanned over a decade, and that his celebrity status and membership in the Church of Scientology had shielded him from the law for years. This is the first chapter in the series, Tarnished Hollywood, Danny Masterson. Before we begin, I'll warn you that this episode discusses the crime of rape. If this topic is particularly disturbing to you, please use discretion before listening. One of the most terrifying prospects for us as humans is the thought of becoming the victim of a sexual assault. Those who have experienced rape describe it as a crime that can utterly strip you of your sense of safety, your trust in others, and can alter your sense of self. Its devastating effects can reverberate throughout your lifetime. The word rape often calls to mind visions of an unknown predator lurking in the dark. The more cautious of us take care to be mindful around shadowy strangers in dark parking lots or other secluded places. But 3 women who were victims of sexual assault in the early 2000s knew their rapist well. 2 were friends or acquaintances with their attacker, and 1 was in a relationship with him for several years. All 3 were members of the same church as their attacker. When they came forward, the details of their attacks were similar. Actor Danny Masterson, a well-known television personality and member of the Church of Scientology, had drugged and raped them, they said. After experiencing the initial shock and horror of their attack, they initially reported the crime to a friend, family member, or another church member. According to all 3, who were also members of the Church of Scientology at the time of the rapes, they were dissuaded from going to the police by church authorities. Instead, they were told it would be handled within the church's justice structure. While at first they believed that Masterson would be held accountable for his crimes, they soon began to suspect that not only would he go unpunished, but that he believed he was untouchable. Daniel Peter Masterson was born on March 13, 1976, in Long Island, New York. He was the oldest of 2 boys born to Carol and Peter Masterson. At the age of 4, Danny became a child model and actor. He was featured in magazine ads and several television commercials. By 16, his resume would include over 100 television commercial appearances. Beginning at age 8, he landed roles in children's musicals, but his singing career ended when he hit puberty. Peter and Carol Masterson were members of the Church of Scientology and raised their boys to be believers as well. The Church of Scientology has a long history that has often been marked by controversy. While I cannot cover the history of Scientology in detail in this episode, I'll give you a brief summary in case you are unfamiliar with Scientology or its teachings. Scientology is a belief system and religious movement founded by L. Ron Hubbard in the early 1950s. Hubbard, who was also an author of science fiction novels, created Scientology as a self-help program focused on guiding individuals toward spiritual enlightenment and personal development. Interestingly, Hubbard claimed that all humans struggle with personal challenges because 75 million years ago, humankind was invaded by destructive alien souls. He contended that only through practicing Scientology could people be cleared of this invasion. Practices to clear these blocks to spiritual enlightenment in the Church of Scientology include self-help courses, personality testing, and auditing. During auditing sessions, members are hooked up to an e-meter, a machine comparable to a lie detector, in that it is said to register emotional reactions. Church members being audited are also asked questions while connected to this machine. Sometimes very personal and private information is elicited through the process. Scientologists sometimes pay exorbitant prices for self-help materials and courses while working to ascend to higher levels of spiritual growth. The Church discourages members from engaging in traditional therapy for mental or emotional issues, which they warn relies too heavily on the use of medication and not enough on personal responsibility for one's problems. The Church of Scientology, the institution that promotes and oversees Scientology principles, has encountered controversy, especially in the recent past. Some of the controversy is a result of allegations of financial exploitation of its members, harassment directed towards its critics, and secretive practices within its ranks, among other issues. However, Scientology has gained a foothold in many countries around the world. Its financial operations are run more like a for-profit company than a traditional church. As a result of its profit structure, the Church of Scientology is valued at over $1.5 billion, while still enjoying tax-exempt status as a religious organization. Because of its wealth, the Church of Scientology can market itself to new members through widespread outreach efforts like media campaigns. Many members are sold on Scientology's ideas of personal growth and self-development, and the close-knit community it provides. However, critics and former members have argued that some church branches encourage members to avoid or reject relationships with non-Scientologists. This has created a cult-like atmosphere for the most dedicated members of the organization. Danny Masterson was raised in Scientology, but his mother would commit herself more to its teachings after she and her husband divorced. Danny's parents divorced before he was school-aged. 2 years after the divorce, Carol began dating fellow Scientologist Joe Reish, a Lebanese-Australian soccer player. They married in 1985, when Danny and Christopher were ages 9 and 5. Joe and Carol had 2 more children together. Danny and Christopher's half-brother Jordan was born in 1986, and their half-sister Alana in 1988. Danny and Christopher attended schools run by Scientologists and were well-versed in the church's teachings. After they married, Joe and Carol became very dedicated Scientologists and even joined the Sea Organization. Members of Sea Org, as it was called, were set apart as an elite group of Scientologists who promised to commit 100% of their time to serving the church. Sea Org members were required to sign a $1 billion-year contract that also required them to work for the organization in whatever capacity they were called to. Members often worked around the clock and were frequently sent by the church on assignments away from their families, including their children. Masterson's stepfather, Joe Reish, would later report that when he and Carol joined the Sea Org, they were required to relocate. They and the children were housed in a motel run by the church. It was just one small room and a bathroom and was roach-infested, according to Reish. There was only one bed, and the boys had to sleep on the floor. The couple worked long hours as Sea Org members, up to 18 hours a day. While they were gone, the boys were mostly left on their own, although ostensibly the children were said to be supervised by other church members. After 2 years, Joe and Carol grew tired of the long hours and being away from their children. While they remained practicing Scientologists, they returned to civilian life. Carol dedicated her time to managing her son's acting and modeling careers. Christopher also began booking television commercials and at the age of 8, got his first acting role in a television movie. Danny's acting career was also taking off. He landed a role in an episode of the TV series Jake and the Fat Man at age 11. In 1993, he had a recurring role in a television sitcom, Joe's Family, and scored his first film credit playing Seth in Beethoven's Second. More film and television roles followed. In 1997, he joined the cast of Sybil as a regular on the sitcom starring Sybil Shepherd. When season 4 of Sybil ended, Masterson, now 22, decided to move on and auditioned for a role in a new series originally titled Teenage Wasteland. The casting director thought he was too old to play the character of Stephen Hyde, who was written in the script as a 16-year-old. But Masterson was offered the part after he nailed the character of Hyde as the tough, funny guy of the group. The show's title was changed to That 70s Show. It debuted in 1998 and ran for 8 seasons. It launched or catapulted the careers of several of its young cast members, including Topher Grace, Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher, Wilmer Valderrama, and Laura Prepon. After landing the role on That 70s Show, Masterson purchased a home in the Hollywood Hills. Later, it would be reported as the location of the alleged rapes. In 2001, a 23-year-old woman, Chrissy Bixler, reported that Danny Masterson had sexually assaulted her. She didn't go to the police, but made the report to a Church of Scientology ethics officer. Bixler was a member of the church and Danny Masterson's longtime girlfriend. They'd met when she was 18. After they began dating, she joined the church. Bixler described Masterson as alternately charming and controlling throughout their relationship. After about a year together, she said he became even more controlling and also violent. In November of 2001, Bixler said she rejected Masterson's sexual advances, and he tried to force her. She said, quote, "I tried pushing him off me and saying, 'No, I don't want to have sex with you.' He wouldn't stop," end quote. So she said she did something she knew would make him angry and get him to stop. She pulled his hair. Bixler said Masterson insisted during their relationship that she never touch his hair or face. She now hoped by pulling his hair, he'd leave her alone. Instead, he struck her in the face. A month later, Masterson sexually assaulted her while she was unconscious. Bixler believed that Masterson had drugged her before anally raping her. She ended the relationship and reported the assault to the ethics officer at the Church of Scientology's Celebrity Center. The Church of Scientology has had several celebrity members over the years. The most well-known of these members is actor Tom Cruise. John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, Jenna Elfman, and Elizabeth Moss have been or are Scientologists. Actress Leah Remini, once an outspoken advocate for Scientology, has since left the church and is now one of its fiercest critics. Remini wrote a best-selling memoir detailing her life as a Scientologist and an actress. She has also produced and hosted an Emmy Award-winning television series titled Scientology and the Aftermath. She and her guests on the show, most of them former Scientologists, tell their experiences with the church. Many of them detail the church's use of coercion, harassment, and other abusive practices to control members and to prevent former members from speaking out. The Scientology Celebrity Centers in Los Angeles and 9 other locations were established to recruit, quote, artists, politicians, leaders of industry, and sports figures into Scientology. While church spokespersons have denied that celebrities are targeted explicitly for membership, the New York Times has reported that internal church documents show that the Celebrity Center's primary purpose is to, quote, recruit celebrities and use their prestige to help expand Scientology, end quote. Chrissy Bixler reported the rape to staff members at the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles. She thought the church leadership would hold Masterson accountable, but instead, she was told by the ethics officer not to use the word rape to describe what happened to her. Quote, "You can't rape someone you're in a relationship with," Bixler said she was told. She was also warned not to go to the police. They reminded her that reporting another Scientologist to authorities outside of the church could cause her to be declared a suppressive person and subjected to excommunication from the church per church policy. Suppressive persons, or SPs, are members deemed to be a threat to the spiritual growth of those around them. Essentially, a member can be declared an SP if they do anything the church decides violates their policies. If a Scientologist is declared a suppressive person, other Scientologists are instructed to disconnect from them. Members are not allowed to associate with or communicate with SPs or risk being excommunicated themselves. This includes parents disconnecting from their children, spouses disconnecting from each other, and any other family relationships. One example of this is that Joe Reish, Danny Masterson's stepfather, was declared an SP in 2005, when his children Jordan and Alana were 19 and 17. He and Carol had divorced in 1995. Reich reports that as a result, his children disconnected from him and even changed their last name to Masterson. They both became actors like their half-brothers Danny and Christopher and used the Masterson name for their stage names. Christopher Masterson played the role of Francis on the hit television show Malcolm in the Middle from 2000 to 2006. Jordan Masterson has appeared on the show Last Man Standing starring Tim Allen, and Alana had a recurring role on The Walking Dead. Instead of receiving support, counseling, or justice from the church, Bixler said she had to go through a 2-month ethics program to remain in good standing as a member. Part of this program entailed that she make amends to Masterson. Because, as she said, the ethics officer explained, quote, "I must have done something to cause it. We're all responsible for the condition we're in," she was told. Incredibly, as part of her amends towards her attacker, she was required to wash his car. Bixler said she soon realized that not only had Masterson not received any consequences or even an admonishment from the church, but also that, quote, the church would protect him. She may have been right. Years passed, and Masterson's life and career continued to be on track. He ended his role on That 70s Show in 2006. In 2008, he landed a supporting role in the feature film Yes Man starring Jim Carrey. From 2012 to 2014, he was cast on the sitcom Men at Work. Masterson began dating actress and singer Bijou Phillips in 2005. They married in 2011, and their daughter was born in 2014. In 2016, the Netflix series The Ranch debuted, where he co-starred with his friend and former castmate Ashton Kutcher. All may have continued to be golden for Danny Masterson, but the year 2017 ushered in the MeToo movement, and with it, a time of reckoning for men accused of sexual harassment and sexual assault, especially in Hollywood. Who hasn't had an embarrassing BO moment? If you say you, I get it. Too embarrassing to admit, right? Like this one time, I was in an exercise class and I kept thinking, what's that smell? That cannot be me. Well, I won't say who it was, but yikes. Fortunately, Lumi's whole body deodorant makes it so none of us ever has to worry about BO again. How? Unlike certain other deodorants, Lumi is powered by mandelic acid to control odor in a new way. And get this, Lumi delivers 72-hour odor control. Did you hear me say whole body deodorant? That's because Lumi controls odor everywhere, from pits to feet, and everywhere in between, if you catch my drift. Scratch that. That wasn't my drift. Must have been somebody else's. Anywho, I love the variety of products you can choose from to stay odor-free even during your sweatiest moments. Besides Lumi's stick deodorants, they also offer cream deodorants, odor control body wash, cleansing bars, and deodorant wipes. It's so convenient for me to throw a pack of deodorant wipes in my gym bag to have on the go. It just gives me extra confidence during my workouts, you know? And Lumi's products come in amazing scents like toasted coconut, soft powder, and fresh alpine. Or you can go unscented. Lumi's starter pack is perfect for new customers, so you can find your favorite products. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. You can try a mini body wash and deodorant wipes, for example. Plus, free shipping. As a special offer just for my listeners, new customers get $5 off a Lumi starter pack with code ONCE at lumideodorant.com. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack when you visit lumideodorant.com and use code ONCE. That's LUME deodorant.com and code ONCE to let Lumi know I sent you. And we thank Lumi for sponsoring this episode.
I'm Aaron Habel of Generation Y, and with me is Jack Luna of Dark Topic. We'd like to introduce you to Marooned, a new podcast that's sure to capture your attention.
Tales of the catastrophically lost are what we have to offer. Hikers swallowed by the woods. Explorers discovering nothing but destitution. True crime calamity. Oddities of harrowing human experience. It's a museum of misadventure. So pack a lunch.
Subscribe to Marooned wherever you find podcasts. We are waiting. Please hurry. Thank you.
In 2017, multiple rape allegations were leveled against one of the most influential figures in Hollywood, movie producer Harvey Weinstein. Women began speaking out against systemic sexual harassment and assault on Hollywood's casting couches. The phrase MeToo became a social media hashtag used by women who came forward to report sexual abuse in Hollywood and the workplace. But it had been coined over a decade earlier by a woman named Tarana Burke. She first began using the phrase MeToo in her work with survivors of sexual assault to assure them that they were not alone. In October of 2017, actress Alyssa Milano borrowed the phrase and tweeted, quote, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet." Within hours, tens of thousands of people replied. In 24 hours, the hashtag MeToo went viral, with over 12 million reactions on social media. More women came forward, some after years or decades, to report their own experiences of sexual harassment, assault, and rape. Actors, directors, and producers were named among the perpetrators. One by one, they were outed, and the stories went viral. Several high-profile actors, directors, and executives were fired. Some were prosecuted. Popular talk show hosts Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer, and Bill O'Reilly were forced out of their jobs after they were accused of sexual abuse in the workplace. They lost audiences of millions, and their careers tanked. Actor and comedian Bill Cosby and R&B singer R. Kelly were both convicted of rape and sent to prison. And U.S. gymnastics team doctor Larry Nassar was brought up on charges of molesting over 250 young athletes, many underage. He was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in federal prison. Harvey Weinstein was ultimately convicted of rape in 2020 and sentenced to 23 years behind bars. Finally, the amount of time that passed since the sexual assault occurred or was reported didn't negate victims receiving justice. Encouraged by this and hopeful that, at long last, they would be heard and believed, more victims came forward to report crimes. Chrissy Bixler and 3 other women filed reports against Danny Masterson with the Los Angeles Police Department in 2017. All were members of the Church of Scientology, and they revealed that church leaders had warned them against going to the police. They feared retaliation by the church, whom they claimed would subject them to a policy called fair game, should they file a criminal report. Fair game is described as Scientology's brand of retaliation against members by the use of stalking, harassing, threats, and intimidation. The church denies that there is any such policy or that church leaders or members engage in this type of behavior. However, former members would testify and provide evidence of their experiences being fair-gamed. Masterson's accusers at first remained anonymous as Jane Does 1 through 4, while their claims were being investigated. All had similar stories. They were acquainted with Masterson either through the church or friends. They were invited to his home in the Hollywood Hills, where they were offered a drink. They reported being given something, most likely in an alcoholic beverage, that caused them to pass out. They alleged that Masterson raped them while they were semi-conscious or unconscious. The incidents occurred in 2003. Chrissy Bixler, who reported the rape that took place in 2001, made the following statement, quote, "I can no longer be silent. The only way to protect ourselves is to speak. We will see justice for what was done to us and is continuing to be done to us," end quote. In March of 2017, the LAPD began their investigation of Masterson. In December, he was fired by Netflix and written out of the show The Ranch. Still, no charges were filed. In August of 2019, all 4 of his accusers sued Masterson and the Church of Scientology, claiming that since coming forward with charges against the actor, they had been systematically stalked, threatened, and harassed by Scientology operatives to pressure them to withdraw charges. They were suing for emotional distress. Finally, in 2020, Masterson was charged with 3 counts of rape. A 4th charge was dropped because despite, quote, compelling and overwhelming evidence, the Los Angeles District Attorney stated the investigation had stalled and there was not enough evidence to proceed to trial. On June 17th, Danny Masterson was arrested, booked into the LA County Jail, and released on the same day on $3.3 million bail. Due to restrictions as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic, Masterson's arraignment was pushed off until 2021, during which time he remained free. He was not offered any acting roles after being let go by Netflix. In January 2021, Masterson pled not guilty to all charges. He was not present in court, but was represented by high-profile attorney Tom Mesereau. Mesereau, who had famously defended Bill Cosby, Mike Tyson, and Michael Jackson during his child molestation trial, made a statement to the press proclaiming Masterson's innocence. Mesereau claimed that his client was being targeted because he was a Scientologist. Scientology came under fire beginning in the mid-2000s, partially fueled by the release of the HBO documentary Going Clear. There were even more questions raised about the church's practices after Leah Remini's television series Scientology in the Aftermath debuted in 2016. The public became aware of the alleged abuses former Scientologists reportedly suffered in what they described as a cult-like atmosphere of coercion and control in the guise of a religious organization. In October 2022, Masterson's trial began. It had been 2 decades since the crimes for which he was charged were committed. His alleged victims would, at long last, have their day in court. It would take another 1.5 years and 2 trials to see justice done. In October 2022, Masterson sat in court facing 45 years to life on 3 separate charges of rape if convicted. He was represented by Thomas Mesereau, who successfully argued that allegations of drugging be kept out of the trial. Mesereau also scored a win in court when the judge sustained his frequent objections to references made by witnesses regarding the Church of Scientology and its policies. When the trial concluded, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. A mistrial was declared in November. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office was determined to retry the case. The second trial began in April of 2023 in the Los Angeles Superior Court. For the second time, Judge Charlene Olmedo would preside. Before proceedings began, Judge Olmedo made a statement, quote, "This is not going to be a trial on Scientology," she said. However, the second time around, she allowed more leeway for Masterson's accusers to present their experiences with the Church of Scientology. They would be allowed to testify to the church's practices and policies to explain why they didn't initially report Masterson to the police. The judge explained that the reason for her ruling was twofold. First, she thought it would help the jury to understand how the 3 victims, who were all Scientologists at the time of the attacks, felt restrained by the church's policies. Second, she decided that discussing Scientology's rules did not violate the defendant's religious rights, as his attorney had argued. The judge also allowed more testimony to be brought in regarding the prosecution's claim that Masterson had drugged his victims before raping them. Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon and Deputy DA Reinhold Mueller would argue for the prosecution. Masterson was represented in the second trial by Philip Cohen and Sean Hawley. They took a different tack than Mesereau had during the first trial. They told the jury that the case had nothing to do with Scientology. Instead, the defense focused its case on what they said was a lack of credibility by the witnesses. The defense claimed that the 3 women had conspired together to accuse Masterson with the end goal of receiving a large monetary settlement in the civil trial. Masterson's wife, Bijou Phillips, attended court daily during his 2 trials. She was often joined in the gallery by Masterson's mother, Carol, and his siblings, Christopher, Jordan, and Alana, all of whom were still dedicated Scientologists. More recognizable celebrities also supported Masterson in court. His wife was sometimes accompanied by her sisters, actress Mackenzie Phillips and singer and pop star Chynna Phillips. Chynna's husband, actor Billy Baldwin, also attended some of the proceedings in support of Masterson. But all of this star power dimmed once Masterson's accusers took the stand one at a time to describe their terrifying ordeals. Jane Doe No. 1, later identified as Jen B., described how in April of 2003, she'd met up with friends at a nightclub. Her best friend was Masterson's personal assistant. After leaving the club, she and a few others went to Masterson's house. Once there, she was offered a, quote, red-colored, fruity-tasting drink, the first alcoholic drink she consumed that night. Within a few minutes, she felt disoriented. She recalled Masterson pulling her up, still partially dressed, and into his hot tub. She could barely stand. He then took her to an upstairs bathroom, where he stuck a finger down her throat to induce her to vomit. Once she did, he dragged her into the shower to wash her off. The witness said when Masterson began rubbing her bare breasts with soap, she gained more control of her faculties and punched Masterson in the chest in anger. She was still fading in and out of consciousness. Her next memory was of waking up on a bed. Masterson was on top, raping her. She said she grabbed a pillow and shoved it in between them to get him to stop. Masterson held the pillow over her face, and she passed out again. At one point, the witness said that Masterson heard someone coming up the stairs. In an attempt to silence her so they weren't detected, she claimed he grabbed a gun from the nightstand and, holding it above her, warned her not to move. When it was over, she said she crawled into a closet and passed out. Jen B. testified that she reported the incident to the church's ethics officer, who had her work on, quote, self-induced issues, which she spent several weeks doing. She said she felt responsible for what had happened at that time because, quote, I put myself in that situation. I drank. I didn't have a safe plan. I didn't stop it, end quote. These were all things that the church teachings said were her responsibility, and she believed it, Jen said. She'd waited a year before reporting the rape to the Hollywood Police Department. She explained that she was reluctant to go to the police, quote, because I was a Scientologist, and Mr. Masterson is a Scientologist, and you cannot report another Scientologist in good standing to the authorities. My understanding was I would immediately be guilty of a high crime, Jen continued. A high crime comes with the penalty of expulsion from Scientology. You cannot speak or have contact or anything at all with a person who has been expelled or declared a suppressive person. That would have major ramifications. Asked what sort of ramifications, she said, quote, my life would be over. My parents, both Scientologists, would have to disconnect with me. My daughter, 7 or 8 at that time, couldn't go to her school. My parents wouldn't talk to me. I wouldn't have anywhere to work or live. I wouldn't have anywhere to go, end quote. Jen said she wasn't convinced that her parents would choose her over the church if she left. The second witness to testify was Masterson's former girlfriend, Chrissy Bixler. She told the jury she and Masterson had dated for about a year before he became controlling and, quote, aggressive sexually. She woke up on more than one occasion to find he'd forced himself on her, she stated. Bixler described how on one occasion she began screaming and grabbed Masterson's hair to get him off her during an assault. He hit her in the face, spit on her, and called her white trash, Bixler testified. The incident she ultimately reported happened about a month later in December 2001. They'd gone out one evening during which she believed a drink she consumed had been drugged. She didn't recall anything until she awoke the next morning in pain and bleeding from the rectum. She had asked Masterson what happened. Bixler testified that he laughed and said he'd had anal sex with her while she was unconscious. She also described how she'd reported being raped by Masterson to the church's ethics officer. She told the jury she was also told that she was most responsible for the attack. She ended the relationship with Masterson. Bixler also described how she'd been stalked and harassed by Scientology members since coming forward. Jane Doe No. 2 testified that she'd been out with friends in Hollywood and was invited to Masterson's house for drinks. Masterson persuaded her to get into his hot tub. She said she agreed, but made it clear that she was not going to have sex with him. The witness described how she began to, quote, feel fuzzy. Masterson led her upstairs into the shower, where he started kissing her and tried to have sex with her. She testified that she told him no, but was in and out of consciousness and could not fight him off. The next time she came to, she said she found herself lying on a bed. Masterson was penetrating her, and she continued to try and push him away, but, quote, felt like a limp rag doll. She said she also vomited during the rape. She didn't report the incident to the church, but told her mother and best friend what had happened. She was also warned about repercussions from the church should she report Masterson, so she stayed silent. The defense called a former Scientology officer, Claire Headley, to the stand. Headley, a 30-year member, had held a high rank as a security official before leaving the church. She testified that she was an expert on the church's policies and practices. She told the court that the only avenue a Scientologist had to officially report another Scientologist to the police was to first apply for approval by the International Justice Chief, a high-ranking member of the church. Headley said she had never seen this request approved. During her testimony, Jen B. told the jury that before going to the police, she sent a letter seeking approval from the church's International Justice Chief and seeking assurance that she would not be declared an SP. She recalled that he did not grant permission. Claire Headley further testified that a celebrity Scientologist like Danny Masterson was shielded by, quote, ethics protection, a policy written by founder L. Ron Hubbard. It stated that if a Scientologist who is a member in good standing is reported for violating ethics, the report is, quote, filed with a yawn. In other words, the report is added to the member's ethics file, but no action is taken. It was the prosecution's theory that Masterson felt untouchable and free to prey on female Scientologists without consequence. Danny Masterson did not take the stand in either of his trials. His attorney, Philip Cohen, claimed in his opening statement that his client's accusers had conspired against the actor before filing reports with the LAPD. He argued that the women's statements were inconsistent and lacked physical or photo evidence. The Church of Scientology made a statement through a spokesperson, releasing it to the press during both trials. It read, quote, "The Church of Scientology has no policy prohibiting or discouraging members from reporting criminal conduct of anyone, Scientologists or not, to law enforcement. Church policy explicitly demands Scientologists abide by all laws of the land," end quote. However, trial witnesses contradicted this, stating that the church's written policy book, Introduction to Ethics, states that, quote, active reporting or threatening to report Scientology or Scientologists to civil authorities in an effort to suppress Scientology or Scientologists from practicing or receiving standard Scientology is considered a, quote, high crime, end quote. Former Scientologists were called to testify that they had been repeatedly told they could never go to the police regarding another member of the church and should only report crimes to Scientology's internal justice structure. All members knew that if they went against this policy or any other, they could be declared a suppressive person and be shunned by all friends and family members who were also Scientologists. For those who'd been longtime church members, this was practically everyone they knew and loved. Most were unwilling to risk being excommunicated. After 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments were concluded, and the case went to the jury. On May 31, 2023, 47-year-old Danny Masterson was found guilty of 2 counts of forcible rape. The jury had deliberated for 7 days, but were unable to reach a unanimous verdict on the 3rd count of rape. They were deadlocked 8-4 in favor of guilt. When the verdict was read, Masterson didn't react. But his wife, Bijou, a constant presence in the courtroom, began to wail and sob so loudly that the judge finally had to stop the proceedings to ask Ms. Phillips to compose herself. Masterson was led out of the court in handcuffs. He would remain behind bars while awaiting his sentence. 4 months later, in September, Masterson was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. Because his charges were brought under California's strict one-strike law, the 2 guilty verdicts carried potential penalties of 15 years to life each. California's one-strike law imposes additional prison time for several sex crimes when committed under specific aggravating circumstances. It's called one strike because it can lead to a life sentence for a single conviction, even if the defendant has no prior strike convictions. Under this law, harsher sentences for sex crimes can be imposed for aggravating factors, including inflicting bodily harm, use of a dangerous weapon in the commission of the crime, or if a controlled substance has been administered to the victim. Masterson will not be eligible for parole until June 2042. His first parole hearing to consider a potential release date will be in 2038 when he is 62 years old. Before sentencing, one of Masterson's victims read an impact statement to the court. Addressing him directly, she said, quote, "When you raped me, you stole from me. That's what rape is, a theft of the spirit. You are pathetic, disturbed, and completely violent. The world is better off with you in prison." End quote. District Attorney George Gascon made a statement to the press. Quote, "Justice was finally served today," he said. "Los Angeles will no longer be a hunting ground for Hollywood elite who feel entitled to prey on women." Despite fully supporting her husband through both trials, Phillips filed for divorce in September 2023. Masterson agreed to give sole legal custody of his daughter, now age 9, to his ex-wife. He requested visitation rights, but it will be up to the court and the California Department of Corrections to determine if he will receive that privilege. Some have suggested that Masterson's wife was pressured by the Church of Scientology to disconnect from him. In October 2023, information was leaked to the press that the church had formally declared the convicted felon a suppressive person, but it did not publicize their decision. This declaration would require that all church members, including his wife, to have no contact with him. Despite Masterson's excommunication, the Church of Scientology's official statement is that they believe in his innocence. But many Scientologists have questioned why the actor was allowed to remain a member in good standing, even after he was accused of a serious crime, was arrested, and went on trial. They point out that many others have been kicked out for much less severe transgressions, like going online or watching Leah Remini's show. How were these members shunned, but Masterson was not until he was finally convicted years after his crimes came to light, they wondered. One Scientologist said he couldn't understand the church's decision, seeing that Masterson, quote, "brought such a horrible public relations situation onto the church," end quote. It now appears that as far as the Church of Scientology is concerned, Masterson's is a name that must not be mentioned. Masterson was also not mentioned on Netflix's reboot of That 70s Show. His character was MIA in the new series titled That 90s Show, which debuted on the streaming service in 2023. Danny Masterson has not addressed his victims or apologized. He maintains his innocence. He was initially held in North Kern State Prison, but was moved to Corcoran State Prison on January 29, 2024. Corcoran is the correctional facility where Charles Manson was incarcerated until his death in 2017. While Manson was a long-time resident of Corcoran State Prison, Danny Masterson lasted only 2 weeks before being transferred to the Men's Colony West facility located on California's Central Coast. The California Department of Corrections stated that he was being transferred for his well-being, but the specific reason remains unclear. That will do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime. CrimeCon 24 is coming to Nashville this May. Secure your tickets now. They're selling out quickly. I'll be there, and I'd love to meet you on Podcast Row. Use my discount code ONCE for 10% off your registration. Get all the details and the links to register on my website, truecrimepodcast.com, or click on the link in the show notes. Once Upon a Crime was written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez Ludlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia. Until next time, be good to one another.